So into our second of these Monday Musings, I've got Dr. Tom Little from Preston North End, founder of Colour Fit, and just an all-round great guy. Tom, welcome.
Our pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me, Andy.
No problem. Looking like you've been out in the sun there.
Wee bit. Some of it's windburn. It's hilly around here, and certainly the sun disappeared a bit last week, which made the lockdown more difficult for definite. But it's starting to creep back now, so into May, hopefully, we'll get some good weather again.
Anytime I've been up your way, I've never seen the sun, so.
Well, that's the norm here. We had a freakish April, to be fair, and thank God we did. It's been a lot harder, so yeah. Bit of getting back to nature up in the hills, bit of mountain biking and running, and then messing up DIY in the garden as well.
Brilliant, mate. I followed you on Strava, so I can see what you're up to.
Yeah, some hills.
So, Tom, how have you been keeping in lockdown? What have you been up to, and how are you keeping the players going?
Been really busy like everyone else. To say it's lockdown and we have more time, it's just absolutely flown and been super busy all the time. So just being proactive as you can be with the lads. So a lot of Zoom type lessons. So we've been doing our strength, spinning, so a lot of individualized work in terms of nutrition, strength training. So because everyone's got different circumstances, we've had to have a high level of individualization. So the work is all mounted up. So all the strength training has had kind of be specific to the equipment that the lads have got at home. And then we've done some generic stuff, like I said, over Zoom as well, and a lot of nutrition interaction as well, because it's just a good time to buy in while everyone's at home fending for themselves. If you ask the first team player normally to do something like MasterChef, they're telling you to piss off, but during this time they're just using it as good banter. So there's certain areas that we've targeted and had a lot of good feedback from. So we've used it to our advantage as well. So moving that, and then the second side of that is just all the logistics. So things are really ramping up now. Lots of documentation in terms of governing how we're going to be able to start things, when's and where, and pretty problematic to be perfectly honest. So we're just going through all the logistics that you need set up. So we've been dictated to recently that people aren't going to be able to shower, no canteens, no feeding, no recovery modalities in terms of cryotherapy, cool, hot tubs, anything like that. Nothing into, well, very stringent regimes around massages and how you're dealing with recovery, pre-activation, all those things. So it's going around facilitating, empowering the players as much as possible, preempting all the equipment needs, all the nutritional needs. And just we're going to have to be super proactive in terms of our planning so the players just know what they're doing before they come in, because we're not going to be able to have them in groups. We're not going to be able to minimize time in the building. So everything's kind of got to be as seamless and in small groups and multiple layouts of each drill. So many parameters just to minimize all these infection risks. So there's all that. And that's before you start thinking about how you're going to do things in terms of traveling to games. So our first game's Luton away. So we've got 12 hours on the coach. We've got the hotel to deal with. So it's just a mountain of logistics that we're trying to get over at the moment and make sure we hit the ground running, because that's been the main thing as well. In terms of my interaction with the lads is just always trying to motivate them all the time that something really important, tangible is there when we come back, and we can put ourselves in a really advantageous position if we do well. We're sitting in the playoffs. So that's really handy in terms of they can see that goal to come back and do as well as they can. But it's just constantly battering that door down about not just plodding, doing high intensity stuff, doing your intervals, doing your sprint rep training, getting your feet ready, so getting into boots, doing your twisting and turning, because when we come back, we have got to hit the ground running. We've got 3 weeks to get them ready to play 9 games in 56 days, which is tough going. So we're just really pushing, motivating them to go through the pain like a pre-season now, so they're not going to have any prolonged DOMs and just used to all the rigours when we hit the ground running quickly in 2 weeks, 2 days ago.
Wow, it's amazing because over the last couple of months, things have changed so quickly. So here in Utah, we were actually 2 days into our pre-season when things were called off. So I think that's given us to use this time more effectively. But I think we would have been 5 games in now. So I think there's a constant reevaluation of where you are, where people are at. Obviously, the same as yourself here, a lot of this is done remotely. With the players due to the restrictions we have. And I think 2 points there that you touched upon. One, nutrition. Obviously, ColourFit is a great tool. I've used it where I've been before, and the players were very, very complimentary of it. What kind of things have you targeted with nutrition, body composition, or as perhaps maybe as you would do in an off-season?
The main things we've been doing is just practical skills, to be honest. So no real target in terms. Obviously, we've been doing things around weight maintenance, and we've been having regular weigh-in and just checking up on the lads, the odd ones that we're concerned about, getting photos of them. So following them. But in terms of overall for the players, number one, just making sure where they need it, they're getting help. So meal prep has been quite important for some of them, so we've just been organising, making sure that they're eating healthily, and then just upscaling the kind of just practical skills. So like I said, doing things like little master chefs, breakfast of the week, just encouraging them to have a go at certain meals that are available on ColourFit, so pictures and just all quite a lot of bit of banter around them. And then we've also, the new software, it's got an interactive capability in terms of the food database and meal planner. So myself and our designated nutritionist, we can jump on any of the players' database now and either check what they've been logging or write them out specific meal plans. So a lot of kind of education around that, or what's suitable based on that particular person's goals. So that's been really good as well, and the new software's given us a big advantage in terms of doing that, because it's so important, nutrition, that you're taking on board all the nuances of that player. So obviously food likes is a big thing, culture, economics, can be religion, can be diet types, and you've got vegans and pescatarians and things like that. So being able to have that really specific knowledge of the player and then interact with that, combined with the wealth of the database that we've got and our big meal library, makes it really palpable in terms of getting effective changes.
It's brilliant. It's been great to see the evolution of ColourFit. I remember when it was on a Google Drive and how that's evolved, and it's been brilliant to see. And the people I've spoken to and players that I've worked with that we've recommended ColourFit to, thanks to yourself, it's been fantastic. I had one player say, I gave it to my wife and my meals are sorted for the week, and it's like, brilliant. I think I've spoken recently in a presentation about the periodization of nutrition. And I think potentially that's an area that gets neglected. I do have a personal belief or bias that everything relates to your training load and how that week is structured. So it's interesting. I'll probably touch on the next subject now with you around periodization. I heard you talking to Rob Pacey about periodization and those different models, something that we've spoken about before. I think we're in circumstances at the moment where the norm is being challenged, because as you touched on there, you probably have 3 weeks to prepare players, and that for 9 games in 56 days or 53 days. So that then gives you challenges around what actually is the periodization that you're using and how we can do that. And how are you finding that? I know it's a challenge and we've all spoke about it, but how are you finding that at the moment?
Difficult, mate, really difficult. I'd say kind of periodization for me, particularly around kind of any preparation phase, is about progression. So a progression of intensity, a progression of load, a progression of specificity. So that's what we've been trying to do in terms of the programming that we're giving the players now. So it's gone from kind of more generic, less intense, going into more specific and more intense work, up to the stage where we're getting them to sprint, twist and turn, giving them ball drills to do. as well when we go in. When we come back to the actual training bit, we've got 3 weeks to get them ready for a 9-game period in 56 days. So progression is going to have to be sacrificed for the to replace by specificity, because there's so many things to work on. You can't tick all the boxes in that time frame. So all my focuses now has just been trying to get them robust enough so when they come back, they can kind of survive quite specific and intense training straight away, because we can't have them having DOMs that is going to put them back for kind of 2 days. Every session absolutely counts, and we're restricted to just 1 session a day, and we're restricted to time for minimizing our time at the training ground. So I've gone with the ethos of working really hard in singular sessions and then giving them time off to recover, almost on a 3-day or then followed by a 2-day cycle. And like I said, we're not going to be able to tick all the boxes. So I'm going to go more for the specificity of preparing them to play 11-a-side. So we're going to do more, probably focus on large-sided games than we ordinarily would do. And maybe we're not going to have to be able to periodize our different types of conditioning so much. Excuse me, I need to turn Alexa off. I told you this has happened. Alexa, stop.
Technology.
Yeah, we're not going to be, the lasagna's going to burn as well now. That's more importantly. But anyway, getting back to the talk, we're not going to be able to.
Colour fit lasagna.
No, I can't. The vegetable one we've got takes too long, so I've gone for the normal one. But yeah, what we're going to have to do is just pick our most important condition elements. And Tony Strudwick did a really good thing the other day, presentation with Catapult, where he's talking about we're going to have to just pick out our most important elements and iterate and adapt on the go. That's where experience is going to be so important. So I'm going to work on mainly VO2 type conditioning, because I just think it have an effect on all your different areas, your more prolonged endurance adaptations and your more intense endurance adaptations, and you can do that quite easily within small-sided games as well. So lots and lots of things you could go into there, but they're the main things I'm kind of considering at the moment.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was talking to another coach this morning, and I was saying to him how potentially aerobic power, VO2 max, is going to be more important than capacity, especially where we are now, because being able to sustain that is of arguably greater importance than being able to endure it. And of course, that probably now leads on to the next thing about small-sided games, because you wrote a paper with Alan Williams, I think it was, many years ago, a former Manchester Met, mate, Manchester Met. I remember Alan grilling me on something once, but that's a different story.
He's an intimidating guy as well, to be grilled.
Yeah, he's a big guy. Alan and Neil Roach. So Neil, if you're watching this, thanks very much. But no, I mean, small-sided games are great. They're fantastic. We know that we can get physiological adaptations. I know there was a paper that came out recently that talked about a threat of small-sided games, and I think that probably wasn't the right word to use, because I think as well as being technical and tactically good for coaches, we can also get a physiological or physical response from them. Although sometimes I think when we need to hit certain parameters, we need to isolate. We need to isolate certain things, and that may be high-speed running, because it can be difficult at times when you're using a small-sided game and a player's maybe not getting a big enough stimulus during the week because of that small-sided game. I'd love to get your thoughts on that and the sort of the physiological effect of small-sided games, and how, you know, do we need to isolate? Should we not isolate? Can we just solely use those, or are they just part of a puzzle?
Part of the puzzle, definitely. I think that's the main thing to start with. It could be useful for creating certain things. So certainly technically, there's a lot of overload in terms of touching, passing, shooting, blocking, all those things. It's less tactically based, but in terms of, that's why they're so popular in the young game, because it's that huge overload in technical qualities, and that's what they want to deliver. The thing where it's gone in terms of peer-reviewed evidence and looking at research is they're obviously going to use GPS and physiological measures. Now, when it comes to GPS, small-sided games, they're just not fairly equated in terms of the load that they're putting on the player. So if you looked at them in terms of not load over divided by time, then maybe, but we tend to just look at load over time, and you're not getting much high intensity distance. When you are turning, you're not actually turning at high velocities because you haven't had the distance to build up that velocity, but you're still turning as hard as you can. So there's less distance, there's less high velocity distance, there can be less high velocity turning distance. That's not to say, like I was saying before, that you're not twisting and turning a lot, you're just not getting up to those velocities. So when that's equated out, and obviously the much more truncated duration, so when you add all those things together, when the larger side of game, you've got all the higher things that I was talking about then, done for a lot longer period, they obviously look so much harder. But if you have played a small-sided game at any level, you know, Jesus Christ, they are absolutely solid. From four-a-side downward, there is no hiding place in them if you're doing them right. And there kind of is. A cute player can hide in a five-a-side and things like that. So if you ask somebody in their RPE, they would definitely say that the small-sided games, the RPE is higher. But once we go into all these fancy metrics that are validified and very specific, and we can empirically look at them, and they're not subjective, they're objective, larger-sided games are far, far more weighted in terms of loading what you're doing there. So yeah, it's complex basically, but I think you've just got to use your experience and knowledge of doing them yourself to know that they can definitely be a very productive part of the puzzle. And this look for specificity, for 11-a-side all the time, I did mention before, it is going to be really important when we go back, but we're not doing it to be specific for them. And then when you term it as a threat, you're saying it's not a sufficient threshold. I'm just not having that at all in certain physical parameters, because I'm telling you now, five-a-side upwards, I'm playing five-a-side with my mates, I can keep going for an hour. Three-a-side, there is no way on earth that I could keep on doing that at these reasonable intensity. So how can you say that large-sided games are actually harder than these-sided games? If you're doing them, you're absolutely knackered in one a lot quicker than you are in the other. That tells you everything that you need to know in terms of the actual physiological load that's being imparted by them.
But that's it. I mean, I've heard some people knocking sports science over the years and saying, all they want to do is isolate energy systems. Well, you've almost just answered that there, because when you get down to those small 1v1s, highly anaerobic games, when you've worked. But also in that puzzle, which I think tactical periodization has kind of highlighted a little bit more, when you manipulate space and time in those games, you are going to get some of what you want out of it. But it's also hard in a team sport because everybody has a different ceiling. So not everybody is, or potentially not everybody's getting the same physiological effect. And I think as practitioners, maybe we should be aware of that, because I think it's foolish to say, I'm going to do this here and target that. What I think when it comes to metrics with GPS is, yes, we know the smaller the space, the more change of directions, accels, decels. Once you open that up, it's more high-speed running. So the periodization of small-sided games, I think, is crucial within a weekly physical plan. I think coaches, absolutely, there's a technical, tactical element to them. I've heard, we don't like these small-sided games because they're just for conditioning. Well, actually, they're not. They're for everybody's benefit. Again, I think RPE, if you take someone's RPE, they're probably going to tell you the last exercise that they did. So if you do a small-sided game, some smaller ones, probably less than 4v4, and then some high-speed running, they're going to remember that as being quite difficult. But it has huge value when you compare it to something like heart rate in a small-sided game to see how that player is adapting. But it's interesting because I don't think when it comes to those periodization models, I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I think it's where you put those games in, or small-sided games within a training week. And like you said, the periodization going forward in these times that we're in now, then there may be more movement towards an 11v11, because at the end of the day, we've got to win games, or the players, the coaches, and it's about winning games. And arguably, that's the only metric that will count at the end of the day. You guys at Preston are in a good position, so it's a very important period for you.
Yeah, and I think just getting match fit ready and prepared is the importance of that. Within 3 weeks is just going to minimise the amount of small-sided games you could do more than anything else. So the first week we're planning on having an in-house friendly. The second week we're having 2 games in the week, so there'll be a bit of squad rotation. But can you do a lot of small-sided games in that? Not really. And then the final week we just walk back to 1 game before the league starts, so you might put some in then. And there's other parameters to think about in terms of group minimization, in terms of contact time. So that ties into going into more your larger sided games. And what we've thought about is having a good rotation. If we're going down to certain level of drills in terms of size, then we'll probably space them out in terms of doing different things to just minimize that player contact. So some will be doing the game, some will be doing some linear conditioning or something like some shooting that is nicely spaced out, or phase of play, to just, because the smaller the game, the more you're risking that high contact time, which we are getting dictated to. There might be parameters around that, even when we have actually started training, that there could be discouraging that to a certain level. So lots and lots of things to consider in terms of what's the most appropriate type of training to put in.
No, and I think that probably goes back to what Struds was saying the other week. What is it you're looking for? What are the key metrics that you need? And almost bring that down a little bit and looking for those things. And, again, we know that playing styles and formations heavily dictate that. So I think it's wise to be able to look at things and say, okay, what is it we need? If you're playing a fast transition game, there may be high speed running, lots of recovery runs and those things. Maybe high speed running is what you need to look at. I think if we start looking at total distance as an overall marker at the moment, it's irrelevant in these times that we're in. It has some use as a marker of workload and volume, but in these times we're in, I think it really becomes even more relevant for that specificity of the actual game that we're going to go into. And as you say, 9 games in 56 days is a lot.
It is, and then the playoffs.
Yeah. I'll be looking forward to that on US TV. Hopefully they'll be showing that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if it's just a 1-game format this year. I think they'll have to be honest.
Yeah, it's just, over the last couple of weeks, and things have changed daily. There's different things going on, and for the players, and different things from guidelines of what we can do, what we can't do. And as you say, in theory, we love the 1v1s, 2v2s, up to 4v4s. But then if contact is minimized, then that almost puts that out of the water, because you're gonna get higher workload if you open out that pitch for a 4v4. So things are changing rapidly, and it's interesting. It's every time, I'm sure you're the same as yourself, every time you sit down and think of training plans, it changes quickly. Something changes.
Oh, very much so. Yeah. Very much so. I think we've got to be very respectful for all the medical guidelines, and they are medically centralised as they should be. But we've also got to think in the real world as well, that we are going to play 11-a-side. We're going to be long travelling as well. But the thing that you've got to consider is just the kind of high scale of virology in terms of how quickly it can escalate. So where we have got to take as many measures to minimise that risk as much as possible, because it becomes very much exponential. So where we can, we're going to do things like, we're probably going to use the same warm-up every single day. So they just come out, do the match day warm-up, so they know what they're doing straight away. Multiple groups, I can set that very easily out over about 5 or 6 drills. They'll know exactly which player is going to which drill, and like I mentioned before, probably separate them out in positions. We're going to overall, certainly to start off with, we're going to use very familiar and easy type drills. So we've gone through our big database of drills and we're picking ones out again that allow spacing, allow multiple groups, allow us to set up. So they'll go, we need just everything to be seamless and going in. And then where we absolutely necessarily have to have that contact, that's probably going to be in the larger side of games, but everything around that will facilitate kind of social distancing. And that's where lots of planning and being proactive in terms of we're going to plan out all the sessions, make sure the players have them probably the night before via HubSpot, so the videos of the whole session, who's in what groups, separation of positions, so everything, as soon as they land, don't need to go in the facility, it's got to be seamless, land, just boom, 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 super efficient, good high load session, send them on the way.
No, I think that's over the last few weeks, again, you know, just looking at those details and the amount of depth that practitioners are going into to be able to, you know, these are different times, they're serious times, there's a huge risk to everyone. From our athletic...
Long-term times as well.
Yeah.
Long-term times, it's not just going to be boom and gone, there's going to be waves of the importance of this, and looking into next season as well, there's looking at certain medical models. It's pretty scary. I won't scare everyone on here, but certainly don't think that kind of once this starts, this is the end of it. It's going to be changed. And for me, out of everything, the mental change is going to be the hardest thing for the players to accept, because it's been really hard for me to get my head round, well, do I actually have to do this? Because when we start playing, we're going to be on a coach for 12 hours together. What's the kind of point in doing all this? But it is critically important because of that reason that I said there. The scale of one person having it to 3 people having it, once you get on that coach together, is a whole different, the worlds apart from each other. So we have to be super respectful. We have to help out our frontline work in an NHS as much as possible, but getting the players to get that in their head as well. So it's been difficult for me, who've been reading up and knows the series of all this, but for the players to get in their head, right, I'm going to have to wash my kit every day, I'm going to have to come changed, I'm going to have to look after my own bottles, minimise massage, there's going to be none of this getting me arse wiped, no canteen. So I'm just picking up my food. I'm going to have to kind of order what food I want every day and just have the meal prep. I'm going to have to be in charge of a little bit of my supplementation and all my recovery strategies, in charge of all my kind of pre-activation. They're going to have to be really proactive at home, because a lot of those things are certainly not going to be available for definite in the first 3 weeks, because we have those guidelines now. So really difficult mind shift that it's quite easy for us to say it, but once that player is sitting thinking about it honestly, it'll take them about a week for it to really sink in and deal with the consequence of it, and then still have the motivation with all those increased demands on them to crack on and see the big goal inside. It's tough stuff, mate. It's tough stuff. So the sooner you can deal with your players to not scare them, but drop them in the logistics, I think you've got to do it as quickly as possible.
And I think just touching on that, obviously nutrition is a huge part of it. Immunology has now, you know, we know that athletes' immune function can be compromised anyway due to the high levels that they train at. So nutrition, supplementation, if we don't have healthy athletes, then we don't have a team. So I think one thing that this has done has maybe made practitioners look at their practice again and how they can support that through nutritional strategies, educating the players for things like hygiene, where a lot of training grounds now are like hospitals with the level of hygiene that they have. But I think it's made us look at it again and say, we spend our time often, picking up a GPS unit that's got sweat on it and, blood or whatever it is. And maybe we look at these things again and say, we shouldn't be doing that, or that we need to take precautions. And I think that will only do good within as we move and progress. But Tom, it's been
colds and flu should be a piece of piss after this. All this washing hands and all that. But on the nutrition thing, I think there'll be lots of bells and whistles around it. So people have talked about vitamin D, which is super important because there's been really high serum findings of people that have had COVID-19, but like vitamin C, vitamin E, magnesium, zinc, blah, 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 blah. But the main thing for me is going to be adequate calorie intake and carb intake once I start, because the canteen's not going to be there. So are they going to make themselves the breakfast before they're coming in? And are we going to have really good meal prep for them to pick up and just consume on the set? They're going to be the big barriers for me. I know everyone will talk about all the other fancy stuff around it, but for me, it's going to be the basics of are they eating enough and eating enough carbs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Rylan Morgan's had a paper in 2014 about, I think it was salivary IgA they were looking at, and how games in quick succession will compromise that. Now with the risk of a deadly viral infection, it becomes even more important that how are we minimizing that if you have to play a couple of games a week in very quick succession when the immune system function is suppressed. There's arguably a higher risk to those athletes being surrounded by airborne particles, blood, sweat, all these different things that are part of an athlete's daily life.
Cardiac risk as well.
Yeah.
There's big things cardiac with COVID-19, and obviously lung morbidity as well. So pretty complex stuff.
It is, mate. Well, listen, Tom, I'm sure we could talk. It's all actually still the morning here for me, all morning, or you all evening. It's always great catching up with you, and always great having a chat, and brilliant insight that you've given us. Where can people get in touch with you?
My email's just tom.little@sky.com. They can, my socials are colour_fit, so you can have a look at all the stuff on there. No problem as well. And via you as well. You're a very accessible guy, mate, because of Soccerology. So I want to big up you that. It's like, to me, it's absolutely invaluable.
Thank you.
Things that you put on there, mate. So absolutely incredible stuff. So and I really enjoyed your presentation you did for Stat Sports as well.
No, thanks for helping me
there for all the listeners. So credit to you as well. I thought it was brilliant.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it coming from someone like you, considering we went to the same uni, but
I was barely there, mate.
We all say that.
1 day a year to get the papers churned out, and that was that. I think.
Should have been on the PFA course. No one was ever there. Listen, Tom, I'm going to let you get back to your lasagna, and thanks very much for taking the time this evening for you. So it's been a fascinating insight and some really real gems of information there.
Cheers, mate. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.